Thanks for inviting us to speak here. Thanks for coming in and doing this in person and being willing to do events. We're all taking our best swing at figuring all this out these days. So Devin Kelley, Carlos Manriquez, we're both with Method Savvy, and as you see on the cool little video that Carlo whipped up behind me here, we do a lot of things here at Method Savvy kind of across the marketing board, brand experience and growth acceleration. And originally, if we go back to scheduling this event, we'd hope to have our kind of founder here, Jake, speaking about SEO and probably something far more technical than what we could speak to. But apparently there's a competition between his anniversary, which is tonight, and this event. And for some reason, he chose to be elsewhere. So Carlos and I are doing our best to contribute here on probably a less technical level than Jake would, but it let us talk about something really cool that we spend a lot of time thinking about, which is content. And everybody asked us about, because we have a studio here in the office, how can we create more content that is not written content, right? Back in the day, you could just spin up blog posts or white papers and say, great, I built a kind of content library. Well, anyone can do that now. So what is the way in which we can kind of differentiate ourselves? Well, Google owns YouTube. YouTube has a lot of traffic. They like promoting YouTube traffic because they make money off of it too. And frankly, there's just a lot of questions out there SEO-wise that we would prefer to see the answers to in a video format or a visual format than we would read about them. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. We've kind of themed this doing the hardest thing first, because to supercharge your SEO related to multimedia content, you can't kind of do the dip your finger in kind of approach that, oh, I want to rank for this term, so I'm going to write a blog post about it kind of strategy that maybe you have in the past. So Carlos and I are going to bounce back and forth between who kind of covers what content here. Again, Devin Kelley, VP of Client Services. I know a little bit about a lot of things here, not a lot about anything in particular. So I'll cover some of the kind of SEO or content strategy items here. And then Carlos is kind of the brains behind our studio space here and a lot of the content that we produce in the multimedia space. So he's going to come at this from a different direction than we look at kind of how things rank, but rather how we tell the story that we want to rank at the end of the day. Quick promo on us. Method Savvy is a consultancy that makes things. We spend a lot of time talking with folks about what they're trying to accomplish and then going about figuring out how best to accomplish that, and we'll actually do the work on the back end. The reason that we think it's important to do both of these things is that everybody in marketing today is a little bit of everything. You can't go just be an SEO guy and not understand multimedia. You can't not understand content strategy. You can't not understand web development and content management systems and things like that. So we're all in this kind of space where we have to be a little bit of everything these days. And we break that down into three buckets: brand, experience, and growth acceleration. A lot of the SEO stuff that people think about in terms of traditional SEO tactics falls into the growth acceleration bucket. Let's optimize my site. Let's go ahead and look at our title tags. Let's look at building a link structure or a link strategy. But we want to elevate this a little bit to say, what are the experiences that we want to create for folks when they do land on a property of ours or when they are asking for information about an area in which we have expertise? So talked a little bit about this. We won't spend much time on brand experience. Again, this can become any experience. So you guys may have heard this as well. Everybody on our client list is asking us about more ways to create more content that is more differentiated. We've got a room over there that's kind of hidden away. Voice studio, podcasts, things like that. We've got space over there for video, photography, everything else. Why? Because everybody's asking about this and everybody thinks it's hard. We really want to break down those kind of challenges and be able to help people create more stuff faster. Why? So we can do things like build channel plans, push to advertising, supercharge your social presences, make your web properties more enabling, more exciting, more visually stimulating. So cover all those buckets, and then we'll take this back into kind of an SEO strategy side of things and look at SEO performance. This is our SEO performance wheel. It's a mix of a whole bunch of things that you guys are probably familiar with from having a background in this space. And we look at kind of charting this wheel in a way that helps people understand where there may be gaps in their strategy and where they may be missing things along the way. So this gives us kind of a way to understand what's working and what's not, for us to go build a plan around and say, okay, great, what can we do to kind of upfit your SEO strategy or structure? Then, and this is just an example from some client work that we've done, we can look at building a content matrix to say, hey, how do we build stuff that's going to help us rank for where we have gaps or just do better in terms of like long-term building or structuring content. And so this is kind of broken down between emotional and rational content, and then awareness and purchase, or awareness and transaction, depending upon the business. And then looking at all the different things that you are doing or could do that might help you either be more persuasive, be more entertaining, look to drive purchase at the end of the day. Well, that's really cool, but this seems like a lot of work, seems like a lot of stuff. How do we go ahead and like figure out how this all actually gets done? And so with that, I'm going to kick it over to Carlos, let him talk for a couple of minutes about, hey, we have a business, we have smart people doing smart stuff. We need to go backtrack into building this stuff. How do we do that?
Can you guys hear me? Good. Yeah, so with that said, we do a lot, and not just brand campaigns and things like that, and email marketing and things, but what I wanted to focus on is what they brought me on to, is to understand like what video content means to our clients, and how do we promote that, how do we slice and dice it, how do we do what we've done in the past, what I've done all my career, and start to find out ways, different ways to kind of collaborate with the client to say, what is your goals, what is your message, and then not only just build the one thing, but how do we do the one and produce a lot from that? So that kind of targets a lot to what we can do with SEO. So absolutely, video has its advantages. You know this, we all know this, we live in an age that if you're not doing any kind of video marketing, then why aren't you doing that? So all the way from telling your story, your brand story, or your product, or anything like that, and just creates a level of authenticity, and just that social engagement. There's a social element on that, and that how do we build that so people can have more awareness? How do we have more keywords, more tags, more things like that that helps us to keep video engagement, but also just stay on your page longer. So here you can see a lot of things why there's so many advantages. And why? Because it's accessible. I think that we kind of mirror our market, and we're watching Hulu more. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram and YouTube a lot. But a lot of things that we do, in particular, are landing pages. Like, how do we build campaigns? How do we say, hey, this is another feature that we can put out there that tells a broader story. It has more message. It has more capabilities to have like form contacts and things like that. So home pages, social platforms, and everywhere. We're just used to that right now. And just took a couple different measurements from Vidyard, and just why is because people are saying that because of the engagements, they're buying more, they're staying on, they're understanding more of the process of engagement. So watching more, leads to more sales, leads to more contacts, just more awareness and things like that. How do we do that? Just at a really good level is that we look at like what you're doing, where you are now, and then where you want to go. So we do some quick video audits, and I just recently built a little widget or an Excel sheet that said, how can we take what you're doing? Is it working? Maybe go in there and get some YouTube data, percentages, click rates, and things like that. Say it's more than just net new. It's like, how do we use things that you've already done? And how do we say, let's reskin it? And if it doesn't work, if it's hurting your brand, let's get rid of it, or let's have some other ways that we can influence more of the market. So this is kind of just a list of just deeper dives, like your brand message, what's your story, your product, like what do you need, what your needs are, and things like that. And if we go into a deeper dive, we go into, like, again, like I said, what do we keep, reuse, redo, and remove? I look at that from a sense of me storytelling for a long time, and everybody wanted that one silver bullet. It doesn't work. What works is how do we do that and build your foundation of your product, your brand, but also build a campaign using video. And that's kind of how I look at it, is how do we refresh your strategy, creating new content, looking at the old. Here's a system that I kind of use to say, if I'm looking at your YouTube channel, what are you doing? Is it organized first? So people can easily just see where the product is, what their interest level, and all that. So what I try to do is say, I look at it, is it relevant? Is the quality of the video shot well? Is the audio, is it going straight to your message? What's the point? And I think a lot of people, a lot of clients that we hear from, they just want these one-offs, and it's like you're missing the whole point of this. Storytelling is just not the one thing, it's the many things behind it, the influences of how do we get to people to just be more engaged, to see your brand, to see your product, and to be able to make business decisions that way. So in particular, I just come up with all the slews of videos that I've tried to do and I've done, using different channels and different series and like Devin said, podcasts and things like that. So there's so many things that we can do with it, which I'm excited about because most of our clients are very much haven't dipped into probably a third of this. So I feel like we should do more explainers, more social things. But one thing I like to do is client testimonials, because what better way that you sell yourself by your friends and your peers and your clients saying, you guys helped me out. So I just kind of wanted to do you wanted to get into this example. But before we go into client testimonials, I'll bring it back to Devin.
Yeah, before you get to that example,
I
wanted to highlight a couple of things. And I don't know, we were thinking about pizza, so we used pizza examples. So wanted to highlight a couple of things just like story-wise, more broadly here. So you guys have probably all seen this view, right? You search for something on YouTube or on Google, and you end up with a result that puts videos first, right? So in this case, like how to make wood-fired pizza. It's a pretty top of funnel kind of query here. I want to learn how to do something. Well, I want us to notice a couple of things from like an SEO perspective here. One is that even with a pretty direct query like that, we've got a little bit of everything in kind of the titles of these videos here. I just go out of my way to highlight that when you're auditing from an SEO perspective and saying, hey, how to make a wood-fired pizza is a question that almost universally would be better answered with a video than like reading 200 or 300 words. But we've got a couple of videos there that have kind of purely answered that question. So just look at the opportunity here for you to say, hey, I want to answer this question better and do it directly. But in addition to that, there are these sections here where we have key moments broken down within these videos. So someone has built a long form video that's almost 15 minutes long, that at this point is about 5 years old, that is the story of how to make wood-fired pizza. Google, YouTube has already gone about breaking down that video into 10 different discrete questions that may be asked having to do with that subject. So just want to highlight this for you guys when you're thinking about how you think about content and how you think about the way that this is being broken down by Google that you don't have to do, right? So if you take this back to like 5 or 10 years ago in like SEO strategy, you were mining for these long tail questions that are in here, having to build pages for them, having to go, write a blog post on this or write a series with all these individual questions broken down. And what's happened over time here is that Google's actually gotten better at either transcribing or taking the transcription you've provided, looking at when people enter or leave this video, what content they're absorbing, and flipping this out to you without us doing much of anything at all, and dealing with the long tail for you, right? So I want to highlight this back to Carlos's point that like, don't miss the forest despite the trees here in saying that you can take one of those core kind of, main topics that you'd look at with a topic cluster, build a good piece of content about that, understand what these pieces of that content may look like, and then let Google do the work for you in breaking this down, where this same video may rank for every one of these individual questions, but you still got to answer them all by dealing with the big question up front. And cover a couple more things here, just like proof in the pudding. These are actually from YouTube and Google themselves in what they call creating the digital story arc. They're giving us, as like a Google partner agency, content like this to help us break down and structure content on video so it is best absorbed by users. And so the traditional story arc that you see on the left-hand side here is kind of your 3-act play, right? That's how we're kind of used to hearing about things. That's how you tell longer form stories. But when you get to these kind of individual sections that are broken down, people have a specific question, they want to know the answer to that question, and then we'll take the context afterwards, right? So when we're building long form, we can stick to that traditional story arc. When we're looking at shorter form or how we deal with these, like, you know, interior questions, the more specific ones, they're recommending we approach it this way. And again, these are slides directly from Google on this and kind of the digital emerging story arc. If I'm looking for an answer to something, you know, really quickly on my phone, like how hot should my wood-fired oven be when I'm cooking pizza? Well, if you're asking that, you're probably already got the oven turned on, right? I'm not watching 15 minutes at that point. I want to get right to the point. I want to understand what's happening here. But Google may drop me into minute 130 on the 15-minute video to give me that answer. So, this is oftentimes the way we look at this. This is like the long form story that you're telling versus a more transactional story that looks more like this. Again, flipping that story arc around. So instead of the climax at the end, we're pushing it to the front. And then a way that we can go about doing this, and this is kind of helpful when you think about content and content formats, is that your story arc, if we go back to here, you know, you'd say, hey, how do I tell a story with like the crescendo in the front, right? With the kind of most important part up front. Well, we oftentimes use an empathy mapping exercise to build out content strategies. It's built around the idea of what is your audience looking to do, think, feel, and understand. And do is going to be all your really transactional questions. Think is going to be what are you kind of considering in this process. Feel and understand become more kind of ephemeral in their thinking. This is a really good guide to think about, like, how do we tell a broader story, but if we need to, within that story, tell more, you know, like direct, succinct stories within that again, Google's doing the work to help us understand. So I'll flip this back to Carlos to talk about like how we've captured this and how we break it down, because we got to tell the long form version to tell the short form version.
Yeah, so client in this particular case was Catapult. And they're a local client that has a lot of clients around the nation. And one of their clients is Rack Room Shoes. So they came to us with we need a client testimonials. And this is why I love doing these, is because it's authentic. The stories are there, the passion's there. We just have to capture it. We have to put it together. So it comes from the idea, all the way from the thought at the very beginning, the testimonial style, this is what we're doing, and then trying to structure that, get it to paper, and say what kind of video do we want, what kind of story. And going back to Devin, that slide, the story arc, is that we use that all the time. And the beauty about it is, organically, if we want to flip it to where the climax is at the end or the beginning, that's what drives a lot of attention and a lot of our videos to be like, it's not the same thing. It's not a cookie cutter. We have the authority and we have the creativity to just do what we want. But we always start with a plan. We go into which is great, is that the authentic stories coming in, and it's because we ask the right questions. The questions of, who you are, what's your problem, and who solved your problem. So that goes from design to production to post and to final. It takes about 6 weeks for us to do one. So this is a little bit of that kind of 3-act structure. The character setup, we interviewed her to say who you are, what's your title in the business profession, what makes your business so special, why do you do what you do? So we try to evoke that kind of emotion up front to kind of make sure that we get that, and we do this kind of structure through all of our clients. And it's all the same, but we get to kind of mix and match, the kind of story we want to do. Again, Act 2 is usually the problem. What are the challenges you had with your clients and your customers? So they're telling us, again, these true stories that they're either suffering or they need to troubleshoot. And then the solution is the client that got us there, is like Catapult surprised us, that helped us through COVID, and they have multiple services that we like, and they're on call all the time. So we try to put that together, and we get a CTA at the end. It's like, what do you do at the end? You call them, or there's a URL or something like that. But in that, which is really cool, is we usually shoot like an hour worth of content. And we transcribe everything. And then we go in there and we try to make this story through all the acts. While we're doing that, the bigger picture here is really not the 50,000 foot, this is the big video, is we're thinking about how do we make these smaller stories? How do we say or utilize this content to put on the in the web to have more attraction, to say, hey, I see the big video here that's a 2-minute piece, but then I have all these like smaller videos. So in the bigger piece, this is kind of what it looks like from 0 to 2 minutes. Like we show the client, we do some motion graphics, there's a lot of B-roll during the day, and then also just kind of finish with I call it the warm and fuzzy, leave them hanging to say, hey, the person that helped me, I'm better off now, and then there's the CTA. Again, this is the, getting extra content this way with the structure that we have helps us to go in and start to think about, like, how do we get 30-second cuts from this? We work with the writer or our strategist to say, let's build a stinger at the front end, what the question is, and then let that person solve that question, and we're going to turn out like 20 of these videos. Very easy to do. So this is kind of what it looks like. You have your main video, that's 2 minutes, and then you start to see like these smaller videos that we just put an art card in front of this, but you can see like we can keep building this, and then we can actually have multiple videos. If we had other client success, we can do some mashups together to kind of build a bigger campaign.
Cool. So building on what Carlos just shared there, back to kind of the theme of our conversation is, do the hardest thing first when you're thinking about building video content. If we go back 2 slides for Carlos here and said, hey, if I wanted to make a social video or do a transactional piece of content here on how has Catapult supported you on being your best, like that would take as much work as it would for us to build this entire video itself, right? And if Google's going to do the work to pull these kind of micro questions out for you, why bother to answer the small questions, right? We did, 1 day of shooting on this to build a 2-minute video that's ultimately turning into about 10 assets that's really just laddering up exactly the structure that Google has provided here, right? We built one piece of content that's 12 or 13 minutes long, and they've already spun this out into kind of the micro content that we need. So this is different than how a lot of businesses think about like content development, and like focusing on what, from an SEO perspective, I want to rank for how I shape the crust on my pizza. Well, the best way to do that may not be to make a video directly about that. It may be to go back and make the 15-minute video that provides the overarching story with that question answered within it, because it's going to make you more authoritative on the subject. There's going to be links within here, and anyone who's looking to answer that question is probably going to have gone through the rest of this process, right? So very much different than like, I want to dip my toe in and see how this is working, or see how my strategy is going, or can we rank better for one keyword versus like rising tide raises all boats. Message here for anything related to like multimedia content is like, bite the bullet, go do the hardest thing, the long form version of this first, and make sure that you're capturing all the kind of pieces of the puzzle, the stories along the way, the chapters that you want to cover in that longer form story, because it's way too easy for us just to jump to the places that are valuable for us. So kind of last thing here, you guys have probably seen something like this before. If you're not using Also Asked, you should. This is a super cool tool. It makes you look really smart in meetings. But this is the one core term, wood-fired pizza, that we were talking about before. And it breaks down based on search traffic, what are the most common queries that are then a modification of wood-fired pizza, and then what are the modifications on those search terms from there. So if you guys can't see this, wood-fired pizza is our core term. What is wood-fired pizza is the top. Is wood-fired pizza better? Does wood-fired pizza taste different? How long do wood-fired pizzas take to cook? It's your who, what, when, where, why that you would normally take in kind of developing a content strategy, right? I have a core term, then I'm looking at what are the basic things that I would spin out of that. But coming out of each of these, what is wood-fired pizza? There are a whole bunch of other terms that are variations of that. So why use a wood-fired pizza oven? Why does brick oven pizza taste better? Is wood-fired pizza dough different? How hot does a wood-fired pizza oven get? What is a brick oven called? Can you use any wood in wood pizza ovens? All those could be tied back to that core story, and all of this could be summed up in a, hey, here's how to make the best wood-fired pizza, or here's like everything you need to know about wood-fired pizza with these as the breakdown questions and answers. And instead of working from the long tail into the core, when you're doing this multimedia stuff, work the other direction, right? Tell the core story first with all the kind of long form breakdowns within it. And something like Also Ask can help you build out what is this version of the micro questions that you're breaking into kind of a longer story, because you can go punch this in right now, wood-fired pizza, I don't know, best software for accounting or whatever it is that you're trying to sell out there and that you want to rank for. Understand what the kind of breakout questions would be and then build them back into a story structure like this that can allow you to build the long form piece of content that will address all of the deeper questions. Does that make sense? Follow for everybody? Great.